Hello everyone, my name is Bentley. I'm super excited to get to talk about this issue today. I think it's a super important issue. I'm excited to dig deep with y'all about this. So to start off, the economy has had impacts on women in the MENA region for centuries, some positive and some negative. When it comes to the global economic change for women, during the 70s and 80s, the world labor markets were changing rapidly and drastically, involving massive rural and international migration, relocation of industrial and of labor-intensive industries from north to south, and the spread of new technologies, changing the nature of work as a whole. A distinct aspect that was super important for women's change was the relocation of labor-intensive industries from industrially developed to developing countries in search of super cheap labor. And so during this time, they needed super cheap labor. Industries needed super cheap labor, and super young, unmarried, and uneducated women were the perfect candidate for that. So during this time, around the 70s, women's employment increased by about 20%, more than it ever has before. And by the 80s, 40% of women of legal working age were employed in one way or another, which is a drastic amount compared to before. When it comes to the local economy, between the 1960s and 1980s, the large part of the MENA countries pursued import substitution, in which machinery was imported to run local industries producing consumer goods. So these industries was creating things for the local people, and creating these industries that people needed, and these women were able to work. These, similar to the workers I described before, unmarried, young, not super educated women, were able to work in factories or industrial plants. And also, if you were an educated woman when it came to local economics, finding a decent job in education, teaching, health, wellness, offered the greatest possibilities when it came to income. In the 1960s through the 80s, governments instituted also social security programs that were aiding working mothers. This provided paid maternity leave, and in workplace nurseries as well. Unfortunately, on the flip side of this, during the economic downturn in the MENA region, job-seeking young women experienced rates of unemployment as high as 30%. So this aspect is a negative aspect, as I've been talking about more positive aspects that the economies have given Middle Eastern women. This was definitely a time where it impacted them negatively. The disparity between unemployment of men and women were incredible. Women were unemployed way more than men during this economic disparity time, for sure, which was a huge negative for women because they needed jobs and they weren't able to get them, and they were dealing with unemployment. So some non-economic factors that impact Middle Eastern women have to do with the way of life for women, and how accessing a job may be hard for women there. Having the right to choose your occupation in general is something that may seem easily accessible to women in the United States or in the Western area of the world, but definitely for Middle Eastern women, it is not as hard as it seems. Things like family law that cause Middle Eastern women to have to ask permission from their fathers or husbands to seek employment or sign a contract or even travel, cause women to have many downsides to that. Muslim family law may even limit women's portion of family wealth, with the result that women are at a huge disadvantage compared with males, especially also when they try and start something like a business as well. And some characteristics of the female labor force in the MENA countries are much of what women perform in the urban informal sector or household is not recognized as contribution to the national income or development, but rather to be perceived as just helping out the family rather than an actual contribution to the economy, and to the growth of that country economically. Women's agricultural work also has tended to be underreported in national accounts as well. So I think to move forward towards women's economic citizenship, a freely chosen job, equitable and equal wages for work of equal value, dignified working and living conditions for employees and their families, professional training, equal opportunities for promotion, and protection for families are huge aspects that need to be looked at as super important to gain women's access to economic citizenship and have them not looked at as, oh, they just are working because they're bored, which is, I think, a big mindset, and for women in general, not even just in the MENA region, but I think that mindset, that women are just working because they might be bored or to help the family, and they're not actual representatives in helping the economic growth of their country, definitely is a mindset that needs to be changed. And so I think those things that I just listed can really help grow that economic citizenship for women in the MENA region and also everywhere as well, for sure. So thank you guys so much for listening, and I hope you all have a great rest of your week. And yes, thank you so much.